All right. Well, I'd like to thank everybody who is continuing to follow along with the Youth Sports Mental Health and Wellness Alliance. January, our focus was emotional intelligence for our Mental Health Monday posts. And here in February, we're actually going to be talking a lot about the transition into college for a lot of student athletes. February is a very important time in the recruiting and the commitment process for student athletes entering into college. It's when National Signing Day typically takes place. And there's a lot of issues and there's a lot of things that student athletes should consider when choosing the right college for them. And joining me today to talk about this issue is Sonja Lund, the Associate Athletic Director for Student Athlete Mental Health and Wellbeing from Old Dominion University based in Norfolk, Virginia. So Sonja, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today.
Absolutely a pleasure to be here.
Well, let's jump right into it. In your experiences, what has been the biggest hurdle or challenge in the transition from high school athlete to collegiate athlete?
Yeah, this is actually an interesting question because I have one answer, but it has multiple prongs to it. So by far and large, the biggest challenge is adjusting to multiple life adjustments at the same time. So not only are you now responsible for everything, like nobody's going to do your laundry for you. You have to do that now, take care of the house, clean those basic day-to-day responsibilities. But also as a college athlete, you're learning how to balance those roles between being an athlete and being a student. Essentially, you have two part-time jobs, which would make up a full-time job. So especially if you're in season, your time demands are going to be pretty large. And so you have to figure out, how do I still do well academically and handle my athletic responsibilities too? Now, another big thing that I see a lot of times in that first year is this adjustment to no longer being the star player. So you were probably pretty well, known in your high school town, you were a star athlete there, but you get to college and in your first year, you find out very quickly that there are a lot of other players who are doing better than you. And I think it's important to keep perspective on those things because it can easily influence your confidence levels. And so understanding that everybody you see who's doing well was in your spot at one point in time, but I think it does catch people off guard when they're like, oh, I'm good, but there are people who are better. The other thing is adjusting to building social connections. So unless you're coming into college with friends that you already have from high school, you're gonna be learning how to connect with new people, and then also just being away from home. So if you are at a university that's a little ways away, it's an adjustment to get used to not being able to just run home, say hi to your parents or see your siblings, pet your dog. All those things are a big adjustment. So definitely those things happening all at the same time can be extremely overwhelming.
Our focus in January for our Mental Health Monday campaign was emotional intelligence. And you just touched on one of the 5 principles, which is social skills, social interaction. So it's very interesting. And I think for people out there who are going to watch this, it's interesting to see how all of these topics we talk about throughout the year are interconnected. But speaking specifically about your role at ODU, we are still kind of at the very beginning phases of having roles like yours a part of collegiate athletic department. So again, I'll repeat your title. It's Associate Athletic Director for Student Athlete Mental Health and Wellbeing. Give us some insight, if you can, into what that role details or entails, I should say.
Yeah. So this is actually brand new for ODU. This past fall semester was our first semester up and running. So we're kind of building things up as we continue to grow and look forward to the future. But I oversee a lot of our mental health initiatives, to include running our athlete-specific counseling center. So we have counselors on staff. A few are former athletes themselves. They have more athletic knowledge or research background in that. We also work with coaches and teams to consult with them if there's an issue they see on their team or something they want to strengthen within their team. We're available to do workshops with them. We'll also have general workshops for all the student athletes. So last semester we did one on athlete life balance. And then before finals week, we did a de-stressor event where everyone just got to do a bunch of carefree things and take an hour out of their day to not worry about stuff. And coming up in February, we'll be doing an event on wellness. So we'll talk about sleep and how that impacts your mental health, nutrition, becoming a medical advocate for yourself, those kinds of things to take care of your overall well-being, because it's so highly connected to your mental health. And then we're also looking to continue to build connections in our community. We really want to bring awareness to mental health and how it impacts athletes. And I think the more we have conversations like these, the more we're able to educate the public and have athletes feel seen and heard.
Well, let's talk about that connection to the student athletes. How has the approach to mental health and wellness changed? Or I wouldn't even say changed. How has it evolved in collegiate athletics since the time that you started getting involved in collegiate athletics?
Yeah, so I started really figuring out this was the area I wanted to go into during my master's program. And at that time, there was not a lot going on. So that was like around 2014, 2015. So there were a few things here and there. I would go to research things on athletes. The literature was pretty sparse, but it grew very, very quickly. Like within the last 10 years, you would have found maybe 5 or 10 articles on the topic. Now you can find 30. And so we're definitely seeing more attention being put into the population. I think mental health stigma is being challenged more and more. We see it at the pro level. People are saying things like, I need a break for my mental health, or this is impacting how I'm playing. So the issues have always been there, right? But it's just now people are feeling more comfortable about talking about them because we are slowly breaking down that mental health stigma. And I think the NCAA has really done a good job of emphasizing mental health and kind of seeing it evolve and understanding the importance of it in the college atmosphere. So they have grant programs. They've had those since 2014 to fund research on athletes and mental health. They have a mental health advisory board. And so I think we're going to continue to see a lot more policies come out from NCAA about what we should be doing to address the mental health needs of athletes. And then, of course, we have universities like ODU where we've integrated mental health services right into the athletic department. And I think we're going to continue to see that grow and strengthen over time.
What sort of reaction and response have you seen from the programs, the athletic programs on campus? Are they receptive to this resource that's now being offered to them within the athletics department, not just the general student population?
Yeah, so I think, I will tell you, it was the number one request of the student athletes themselves. They requested 2 major things when they were talking to our athletic director, and it was mental health services and nutrition services. And so by putting this mental health service in place, we definitely are addressing their direct needs, and it's being utilized quite a bit. I can tell you, in the fall semester, we conducted 268 counseling sessions, which is a lot. So students definitely need it and they're using it. And more often than not, they'll refer themselves here for things. But we also see coaches who are great about recognizing, hey, something's not right in my student right now, and I really feel like they need to talk to somebody. And they'll bring them over to talk with us as well. And I think we want to continue to grow more of those like group team experiences and take an approach where we're able to help teams strengthen the connections they have among their players, because that makes a huge difference in adjusting to college and their performance overall.
For the next few years, we're going to see the incoming classes for new students, first-year athletes, having been a part of the pandemic life, where sports was stopped in middle school and high school, and very formative years for athletes. What do you foresee as far as the resources and the things that will be available to them to help them continue to, I don't know if recover is the right term, but move past the pandemic and what that did to their athletic life?
Yeah, it was a huge interruption for a lot of people. And I think we're definitely seeing more higher rates of depression, anxiety, social anxiety has kind of skyrocketed. So definitely providing services to kind of address those needs. For example, having a group setting where we talk about social skills and how to utilize those, and allowing the athletes to connect in that specific space is going to be really helpful. I think a lot of people have just gotten used to being alone. And sometimes they self-isolate without even meaning to. And so recognizing within yourself as well, am I withdrawing? Like, what should I do to kind of push myself to be a little more social? But those are definitely a big interruption. And then I think, as strange as it sounds, there's kind of some grieving that goes along with this too. I've heard students who didn't get a prom, they didn't get, their graduation. And that's part of that normal experience in high school. And when you miss out on those things, it does like really kind of hurt. And, you feel like definitely there should have been a little bit more. It kind of leaves you feeling a little empty. So helping people process and grieve the things that they weren't able to do during the pandemic, and finding ways to move forward beyond that. And specific to college students, I think some people feel underprepared given their online schooling experiences, and they're still adjusting to being back in the classroom.
That's actually a great segue to really the final thing I wanted to touch on is you talk about being prepared. You're at the college level, but before they're collegiate athletes, they're youth athletes and they're student athletes in high school and middle school. And even before that, while the resources are continuing to grow, what can the high schools, what can the youth organizations do on a small scale? We realize that change doesn't happen overnight, but over time, what can they do to start building this positive atmosphere to help better prepare the student athletes for when they do get to campus, wherever that may be?
I think there are a lot of different skills that are important to come into college with, and not everyone is taught those skills. And sometimes that's where we come in and we start teaching people skills. But the sooner they're able to learn them, like taking a more proactive approach, the more they'll be able to utilize them when they encounter barriers throughout life. I think the tone you set around athletics is extremely important. Students will bring their early life experiences along with them when they come to college. So, and it's often informing what their current perceptions of themselves are, what their perceptions of their athletic ability are. I've had students come in who've had great experiences with coaches and mentors, and I've had students come in who didn't have great experiences, and it's getting in the way of their athletic performance because that voice in the back of their head is telling them you're not doing good enough, or you are just a number. So some of the messages they receive early on really do stick with them throughout life. There is a way to be competitive and understanding. You don't have to sacrifice quality to display empathy. So the two don't have to be separate things, they can coexist. And I think that's a big thing to work on as you approach younger athletes. Along with that, I'll say one skill that's important is to teach emotional management. We talked about emotional intelligence. And so, yes, we can acknowledge emotions and people's big feelings, right? But if you don't teach them how to deal or cope with those big feelings, it doesn't necessarily matter how much you validate them, because they're still going to be left over with, what do I do now? Or if they don't learn like anger management skills and then they're displayed on the court in college, that's just not going to fly. So learning those things early on and taking them with you to college is really important, I think.
I actually lied. I have one more for you because you kind of led me into one more question. But, we obviously know the visibility for recruiting is really big in football and baseball, basketball, baseball, those sports. But for the student athlete that is really just looking at college to further their athletic career prior to their professional career, what sort of questions should they be asking when it comes to what resources are available to make sure that there is a positive mental health and wellness atmosphere at the institution?
Yeah, there are a lot of good questions to ask. I think definitely just asking what are your mental health resources for athletes specifically, and determining whether they're included within the athletic department or they're on campus. Every college campus has a college counseling center, But I can also tell you that every college counseling center is overwhelmed. Most of them have a wait list. We're really trying to re-envision what college counseling looks like to meet the demands that we're facing. And so this is where having these athlete-specific services really comes in handy, because you're not going to get on a wait list. You're able to get into our services pretty immediately and get your needs addressed. I would also ask about crisis. How is crisis managed? We have somebody on call on the weekend. So if something were to happen over the weekend, students would not be alone in their experience, and there's somebody to reach out to. So learning how a university handles those kinds of situations is important as well. And I think just while you're on the recruiting trip, considering what the division level is important for your mental health. Everyone wants to be at that highly competitive level, but it's not the best for everyone's mental health. And I think a lot of people realize that in their first year, and they get into it and they're like, I'm in for a little more than I bargained for, and that's totally okay. And I think that's another piece that has to kind of come along with that, is accepting that it's okay if you can't do Division 1. Like, there's Division 2, Division 3, there's still intramural teams, there's still other ways to be involved in your sport in college, and it doesn't necessarily have to be at that super highly competitive level if that's not the right match for you.
Definitely some great insight. We've really enjoyed kind of learning more about your role at ODU and the resources that are growing within the intercollegiate athletics community. Dr. Sonja Lund, I really want to thank you for taking the time today to talk to us and talk about Mental Health Mondays and our Youth Sports Mental Health and Wellness Alliance. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Yes, thank you for having me.
And for everybody who's watching and who will watch this, please continue to follow the Hall of Fame, CHKD, Cutler Wellness Programs, and all of our community partners for Mental Health Mondays. We're talking about colleges and universities in February, and even though they're student athletes that are getting a bit older and most likely adults, they were youth athletes, and they were closest to youth athletes before they get to college. So everybody who's going to watch along and follow this, please continue to do so. And we'll be back with more regarding the Youth Sports Mental Health and Wellness Alliance.